Today we look at one of my favorite stories from the Bible, the story of Daniel and the lion's den. As a kid, this story captured my attention. A den of hungry killer lions against one little preacher. But now that I've been to Africa and seen lions up close, the story fascinates me even more. A lion is fast, strong, and ferocious. A lion can run 50 miles an hour and leap as far as 36 feet. Now, you can find a lot of advice online about how to survive a lion attack. Here's one of my favorite helpful hints. Being charged by a lion when you're on foot is extremely frightening. No matter how scared you are, do not run and do not turn your back to the lion. Most charges are mock charges, so you'll usually be fine. See, now my problem with that statement is two words, most and usually. So I read that and it says, if it's not a mock charge, you will be eaten. 2010, Cindy and I were in Africa with our missionaries, Scott and Karen Hansen. Scott and I were out early in the morning driving through a game preserve when we spotted a lion with a noose around its neck. We called the wildlife officials and they asked us to stay with the lion while a doctor flew in to check on it. So we hurried back to the tents, got Cindy and Karen, and then we started our lion watching duties. When the doctor got there, we took the doctor in close to see the noose around the lion's neck. And after some study, the doctor shot the lion with a tranquilizer dart. The lion ran, then staggered, and then fell to the ground unconscious. And we pulled up right next to it, and we watched the doctor cut that tight metal noose off its neck and applied medication to the deep cut. And then the doctor looked up at us and said something in Swahili that I didn't completely catch. And so I looked at Scott, and Scott said, "Dude, he wants to know if we want to touch the lion." Yes, I do. We jumped out of our open Jeep. We started touching the lion, taking pictures of that magnificent animal. I even took one with my chin resting on its back. I was feeling pretty good about myself. And then Scott and I sat there and we started talking just with our hands resting on the lion. I mean, it was a once in a lifetime experience until all of a sudden that lion started to move. It stretched and then it opened its mouth with a loud roar. And in that moment, I didn't care what the internet said. I never even considered bravely standing still and facing down that lion. I mean, I turned my back and ran like a scared junior high girl. The doctor dove in the back of his pickup. Scott and I ran and dove headfirst into the Jeep. I mean, our adrenaline was pumping. I did not want to be that lion's late lunch. Now, you're probably never going to face a literal lion, a hungry lion that wants to eat you. I hope. But at some point in your journey, you'll face an enemy intent on destroying you. You'll likely face an impossible situation, maybe several, where it seems like there's no way out. It might happen at work or school. A mean-spirited, evil person is trying to destroy your reputation. They don't fight fair. Their attacks and their lies are taking a toll. It's incredible. Some people actually believe them. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. And you feel surrounded, like there's no way out. Might happen at home. Now, I know, don't go there. I'm not trying to compare your spouse to a mean, angry beast, although some of you already made that comparison. But a marriage goes bad, even turns violent. A child rebels. A family suffers conflict. Everything you've worked for and counted on is in danger. It doesn't look like you'll make it. Maybe for you it's personal. It's a battle with a disease, an addiction, an illness. You don't have much hope. Your future, your career, your financial future all seem in jeopardy. All you can think is, how do I survive? What do I do? Where do I go? How do you stand and win in the face of impossible odds? If you're there right now, listen close, because this message is for you. If you're not there now, you still need to listen and take notes, because one day you very well could be in that situation. Daniel was a captive in Babylon for many years, but he demonstrated wisdom and intelligence, and because of that, he became one of the most powerful men in the entire kingdom. In fact, where we pick up the story, King Darius planned to elevate Daniel to the number 2 position in the entire country. Darius would be king, Daniel would be president. As you can imagine, that didn't make the other employees and politicians very happy. The administrators and satraps, that's rulers, tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in his conduct of government affairs, but they were unable to do so. Now, that's an awesome statement. Wouldn't you like that to be said about you? They tried to find something they could use to accuse Dave, but they couldn't. He tried to find something to say against Pastor Parker, but couldn't find anything. That should be your goal as a follower of Jesus, that when people try to attack you, they can't find a valid or a true reason. You say, but Pastor Rod, if they can't find something, won't they just make something up? Yeah, that's what your enemies do. They make up lies. But wise people see through those lies and they say, I know him and what you're saying is not consistent with his character. I refuse to believe gossip and lies. They could find no corruption in Daniel because he was trustworthy, neither corrupt nor negligent. He was responsible. He was honest. He was trustworthy. Apparently, that was unusual in Babylon. Daniel stood out because of his godly character. Finally, these men said, we'll never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. Like Daniel, you should live in such a way that your Christian testimony is the only way you can be attacked. That way, when people attack you, they're not just attacking you, they're taking on God. The administrators and the satraps went as a group to the king and said, O King Darius, live forever. The royal administrators, prefects, all these guys who are in charge, all of us got together. We've all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce the decree that anyone who prays to a god or man during the next 30 days, except you, king, should be thrown in the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree, put it in writing so it can't be altered, in accordance with the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which can't be repealed. So King Darius put the decree in writing. That new law appealed to the king's pride. Everyone is going to worship me for the next 30 days. For 1 month, I and I alone am God. The king fell for the trick, and the trap was set for Daniel. The officials knew Daniel was a man of prayer. They knew no law would change that. Everyone knew his habits. 3 times a day, every day, he went upstairs. He opened a window that looked towards Jerusalem. He knelt down and he prayed. Daniel was faithful and consistent in prayer. Daniel heard the order. The punishment for praying to God was a cruel, agonizing death in the jaws of hungry lions. So when it came time to pray, Daniel snuck to the basement and he hid, turned the lights out, and he whispered a prayer to God. Well, that's what you'd expect. That's not how it happened. When Daniel learned the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day, he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he'd done before. Nothing changed. But I wonder, what did Daniel pray that day? The Bible doesn't say. I imagine he prayed something like this: God, I committed to serve you. I stood for right. I've not given in to wrong. And God, now even though the punishment is being eaten by lions, I won't change my commitment. Now, God, I'm not lying. I'm not excited about the lions, but I trust you. I've lived for you. And if I'm going to die, it will be for you. Even knowing the cost would be his life, Daniel prayed. Prayer builds you up. Prayer strengthens you. Don't wait till you get a bad report from the doctor to build a connection with God. Don't wait until you get a divorce decree. Don't wait until everything goes wrong. Don't wait until you're under attack. You better start now and develop a consistent daily time of prayer. Form a personal connection with God before the attack. Pray before trouble comes. And your thought is, well, if I pray, the attack won't come. Prayer keeps me out of trouble, right? Well, there's nothing in the Bible that supports that statement. It's not, if you pray, you won't have problems. Instead, it's, you will have problems, so you better pray. Prayer prepares you for trouble. It was against the law to pray to anyone but the king. In spite of that, Daniel opened the window and he prayed. To survive life's most difficult challenges and impossible situations, obey God. Start with obedience. Now let me give you a caution, because people use this one principle as a rationale to disobey authorities. They say things like, well, I'm not going to pay taxes because I'm supposed to obey God, not men. Or I don't care what the law says about politics in church. You need to take an offering in support of my favorite candidate. That's a misuse and an abuse of a scriptural principle. The principle is obey God, not disobey the law. And there's a difference. As followers of Jesus, we're supposed to obey the law. But if a law is passed that directly contradicts the command of God, then with the right attitude, we'll obey God. It won't be done with pickets and anger and pride, but with humility and a heart determined to honor God, we will obey regardless of the price. And you say, well, if they make prayer illegal, it won't stop me. If they make attending church illegal, I'll still be here. Will you really? How much you praying now? You come about once a month, but when it's illegal, that's going to up your faithfulness? These men went as a group, found Daniel praying, which is no surprise. That's what they knew they'd find. And Daniel was asking God for help. Daniel didn't go to the king and try to change the law. He didn't start a petition or a phone campaign. Instead, he prayed, God, help me. That's a pretty good way to pray when you're facing an impossible situation. I think sometimes you put too much pressure on yourself. You hear great prayers, pray great prayers, and you think that in impossible situations, you got to come up with big words and fancy phrases. Let me tell you a prayer that works. God, help me. Help. I need help. God gets that. God understands that. God is not in heaven calling the angels saying, listen to that wonderful phrase. No, God responds to the cries of his people when they call for help. They went to the king and they spoke to him about his royal decree. They went and said, King, did you not publish a decree that during the next 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man except you would be thrown in the lion's den? The king said that decree stands. In accordance with the laws of the Medes and Persians, this can't be repealed. The king was about to find out that he'd been tricked and Daniel was trapped. Then they said to the king, Daniel, who's one of the exiles from Judah, he pays no attention to you, king. Or to the decree you put in writing. He still prays 3 times a day. When the king heard this, he was greatly distressed. He was determined to rescue Daniel and made every effort until sundown to save him. King Darius tried to change things, but he couldn't. The law was the law, and there was nothing he could do. Then the men went as a group to the king, and by now, you're just not liking these guys. Now they said, remember, O king, according to the laws of the Medes and Persians, no decree or edict the king issues can be changed. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel, and they threw him in the lion's den. And the king said to Daniel, this is right before they throw him into the lions, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. The king, who had Daniel thrown in the lion's den, was trying to encourage him. Hey, I know you serve your God. Hope that works. Hope he'll save you. Good luck, little buddy. Good luck with the lions. I just imagine Daniel saying, thanks a lot, God, King. Really appreciate that. Thanks for cheering for me. It just makes me feel a lot better. The stone was brought, placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet ring, with the rings of his nobles, so Daniel's situation might not change. No one could break the seal and move the stone. No one could rescue Daniel, and there was no escape. He was in there with the lions all by himself. Then the king returned to his palace, spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him. There's no Netflix for the king. He's just awake. He couldn't sleep. He was worried about Daniel. And for good reason. Daniel had been sealed in a cave with a group of hungry lions. And it was the king who put him there. The king's top leader, his number one guy, the guy he trusted the most, was being eaten. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near the den, he called to Daniel in an anguished voice, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you continually serve, been able to rescue you from the lions? Now this part fascinates me. Remember, the king just passed a law saying that he was God. King Darius, temporary God, was not able to rescue Daniel, but somehow he had faith that Daniel's God could save him. He proved that by calling out, hey Daniel, did it work? Did your God save you? And here's the best two words of the story. Daniel answered. Can you imagine the moment? Daniel answered, and from the lion's den came these words, O king, live forever. Now, that's not what I would have said. Right? Come on. If I just spent a night with the lions, I would not be cheering for the king to live forever. I might have said, oh, king, come on down. Join me. Let's see if the lions like you. If it happened today, Daniel would write a book. He would go on tour. He'd be a star. Daniel would be on Oprah. He'd have 20 million followers on Instagram. He'd have more followers than all the Kardashians combined. But not Daniel. Daniel still humbly honored the king. Daniel didn't get humble in the lion's den. He was humble before he got there. Daniel knew the power of his God. It's an important key to surviving life's most difficult situations. Be humble. Why is that important? Humility is understanding God is great. I am not. I'm nothing without him. I need him. If you think your strength is the answer and your strength will get you through, you won't know how to rely on his strength when you face the lions. That's why we worship. Worship is not just something we do to start a service. Worship is strategic preparation for life's battles. When you worship, you're saying, God, you're all powerful. You're mighty. I trust you. I serve you. God, you are greater than me, and so I worship you. Daniel continued to the king, my God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me because I was found innocent in his sight. And then he takes a little dig at the king. Nor have I done any wrong before you, king. Now, I've heard a lot of preachers describe what happened in that cave. It's great storytelling. It's unbelievable storytelling. You know, Daniel laying his head down on a rock, Daniel resting his head on the lion. I've heard all that great stuff. Here's all we know. God sent an angel who shut the mouths of the lion. We don't have to add a whole lot of detail because that's pretty amazing all by itself. I wish I could have been there to see it. What did Daniel do when the angel showed up? Remember, Daniel was in there all night. And he's in there all night with a bunch of lions who couldn't eat him because God wouldn't let them. I have no clue what happened in that lion's den, but I know what I do. Here's what I think happened. I think Daniel had one amazing worship service. I think he sang songs of worship and praise about the mighty God he served, who shut the mouths of lions. When God delivers you from enemies, your response should be the same as Daniel's worship. Give God the glory. You don't survive because of you. You survive because you serve a God who is greater and mightier and stronger than anything the world can throw against you. We created a playlist on our YouTube channel. The title of it is Songs for the Lion's Den. It's songs for you to play and worship when you're facing an impossible battle. I encourage you, put it on in the background and let it build your faith. Verse 23, the king was overjoyed, and he gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And look at this next part. When Daniel was lifted from the den, no wound was found on him. Apparently they inspected because he trusted in his God. Not only did God shut the mouths of the lions, he wouldn't even let them scratch Daniel. See, I'm afraid that all too often we try to find our own way to shut the mouths of the lions. If Daniel was like us, he would have been eaten in a moment. Daniel didn't run around trying to tire out the lions. He didn't try to find rocks to put between their jaws. Daniel didn't come up with a plan. Actually, he did. It can be summed up in 2 words. Here was Daniel's plan. Trust God. And when you trust God, he shuts the mouths of your attackers. When you trust God, you are not in a position of weakness. You are in a position of strength. Those enemies who are making false accusations against you, let God shut them down. That ex-spouse who's lying in court, God will shut his mouth. Come on, you are not in a position of weakness. The God who created the world is on your side. You can trust him. When you're facing a difficult challenge, listen to God's word. Listen to his promises for you.
When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies live at peace with him.
The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all.
Those who know your name trust in you, for you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you.
The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom.
For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you.
No weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and this is their vindication from me, declares the Lord.
In peace I will lie down and sleep. For you alone, Lord, make me dwell in safety.
Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Though war break out against me, even then I will remain confident.
The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.
The Lord is good, a refuge in times of trouble. He cares for those who trust in him.
Commit your way to the Lord, trusting him in all that you do. He will make your righteous reward shine like the dawn, your vindication like noonday sun.
The works of his hands are faithful and just. All of his precepts are trustworthy.
What he opens, no one can shut. And what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut.
For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11.
Encourage yourself with God's word. When you're facing the impossible situation, listen to his promises. Let his word build your faith. We created an extended version of that video. It's filled with scripture about trust and God's help. Play it, and as you play it, pray it. It's also on our YouTube channel. The title is just Trusting God in Difficulty. Play it and pray scriptures to God. Now, when I heard this story in Sunday school, that's where the story ended. Daniel comes out of the den, the king's happy, they have reunion. But what comes next is absolutely amazing. At the king's command, the men who had falsely accused Daniel were brought in and thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. Seems pretty extreme, doesn't it? But this king wasn't happy about being tricked. Daniel's accusers suffered the very fate they tried to put on him. And this is an important part of the story that proves the power of God. Even though it's a little gory, you don't want to miss this because it verifies the miracle. Before they reached the floor of the den, the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. See, it's not that the lions weren't hungry. It's not that they had a stomach virus or they were intimidated by people. It's not that they couldn't catch Daniel. These people didn't even hit the ground. The lions caught them in the air and ate them. It was gruesome and gory. But listen to me, don't blame the lions. Think how they must have felt. King of the jungle couldn't do anything to one little preacher. They stared at a snack all night long and couldn't eat. Now they're acting like teenage boys who missed lunch. They were hungry. And all of Daniel's accusers and their entire families were gone in one bite. And then King Darius wrote to all the people, nations, and men of every language through the land, may you prosper greatly. I issue a decree. And wow, how his decree changes. In every part of my kingdom, people must fear and reverence the God of Daniel. And then look at these powerful words. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. The result of Daniel's night with the lions, because he trusted in a God who delivered him, a king was changed. A kingdom was changed. An entire nation followed God. All because one little preacher dedicated to his God survived the night with the lions. Look again at the words of the king. What a powerful testimony. These are words, if you're facing lions right now, if you're in an impossible situation, I want you to look at the words of the king. He is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens, on the earth. He is the God who rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. And he can rescue you. You can trust him. Would you bow your heads with me?